All right, so today we are doing section 2.8, domain and range of functions, if you really want to kind of write what we're talking about, functions. But it kind of comes out of the very first thing that we mentioned. But it's domain and range. I can remember when I was in high school, I always struggled with this because I didn't understand it. The way they explained it to me was based on mathematical definition. Mathematical definition is kind of hard to understand sometimes. So I wish they would have told me a different way to think about it. I have done something like that for you guys. We'll talk about that in a bit. So I think I make it a lot easier to understand. But the problem is, this is a very easy section. Very, very easy. But conceptually, it's tough. You don't have to do any work, really, to do today's homework. But you have to think your way through it, and then you're going to write your answers, okay? And the answers are nothing more than like two numbers and like either parentheses or brackets. Like that's kind of what your answers look like. Or else you're going to be saying function, not a function. That's it, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about, first off, the easiest part of this lesson. How do you identify a function graphically? So every time I write an equation like f of x equals to x plus 2, y equals to 2x minus 3, we always say that those are called expressions, okay? But there's a way that they can graduate to the term a function, okay? And to be a function, you have to fit a specific definition, okay? And that definition, I wrote it for you guys right here. I said, how are you going to identify a function graphically? You're going to use the vertical line test, okay? The vertical line test basically says that if you draw many vertical lines across a graph, so there's going to be a graph provided for you already. If you draw them across each graph, a bunch of vertical lines, and each one only touches the graph one time, then the graph is a function. If it touches more than once, it's not a function. It's an expression, okay? So I said, are these functions? Now notice, I didn't draw anything yet, okay? I want you guys to just basically put a 1, 2, and 3 and a huge plus sign, okay? I'm not going to make any markings. I'm not doing tick marks, nothing like that. I'm going to draw 3 different graphs. And they don't have to be perfect or nothing like that. That's why I said no tick marks. Okay, I just want you guys to try to draw them similar to what I'm doing. But it doesn't have to be the same. But similar. I don't care where it crosses on the top, on the left, on the right. It doesn't matter. Just draw those pictures. Because the important part is just us doing the test. Okay? So I want to figure out if this straight line is considered a function, if that circle is considered a function, and if that negative quadratic function, because it's opening down, is considered a function as well. So here's what you're going to do. Now you can do this with your finger or you can do this with a pencil if you're drawing it on paper, but you guys are going to be doing this on quizzes, so it's going to be on your screen. Okay? So you're going to have to kind of like use your finger in like with kind of ghosting a line, right? Like saying like, is it going to cross more than once? But if you're doing it on paper, it's going to look like this. Vertical line crosses once. Vertical line cross once. Here's another vertical line. Another one, just crossing once every single time. I could draw many, many more. But is it always just going to cross one time every time? Yeah, it will. It will. Okay? Every line, notice, is only crossing once every single time. Okay? Doesn't matter where I draw it. Now, by the way, just so you look, I'm going to zoom in real quick. I don't want people to say, oh, it crossed twice. It crossed the arrowhead. Well, the arrowhead doesn't count because it actually doesn't have to be there. Okay? But as long as it's only every vertical line you can see, only crossed one time. Right? Every single one. I can draw another one right here. Right? Only crosses one time. So as long as it does that, then we're going to say that this is a function. So I'm just going to write function. So function. So that's pretty easy, right? Let's check the next graph out. I'm going to draw one at the very edge. It only touches once. So far this is considered a function. But then I draw another line and I look and it touched 2 times. So now it's not a function. So I'm going to write not a function. What do you think? Number 3, is it a function or not a function? That's a function, right? Look. Once, right? Just drawing vertical lines. One time, One time, every single time. Again, don't count the arrowheads. Okay? But I can draw tons and tons of vertical lines, and every single vertical line is only going to touch one time. Okay? So this one is a function. So that's pretty easy, right? If the homework is like that, you're probably going to get it done in 2 minutes, and that's it. You'd be done. But it's not only like that, okay? But there are questions like this. There's like 3 or 4 of them in your homework that are just going to ask you, are these functions? So you're just going to have to visually imagine vertical lines on them and then see, will they ever touch more than once? So here's some more writing portion. So I am going to pause it while you guys write this stuff out. But this talks about the domain and the range. So let me pause it really quick and I'll unpause it a bit. All right, so the two main things, like I told you guys, when I was in high school that used to confuse me all the time was domain and range, okay? So domain are your x values. You look at a graph, you ask yourself, what x values does this graph cross over? Now, I don't literally mean touching the x-axis. I just mean that the graph is flying around the coordinate plane. What x values does it contain? What does it occupy? So that mathematically, that's what it means. The x values that a function occupies. Okay? But later on, as I kind of started working through these things and trying to learn and stuff like that, I found an easier way to think about it. I said, how far to the left does the graph go? How far to the right does it go? That's my domain. How far left to how far right? Okay, so you can think of it as the x values that the function occupies, but to me, I always ask how far left, how far right. That's my domain. My range is the y values that the function occupies. Okay, so the function can be all over the place. All I'm interested in is what y values does it cross. So the easy way to think of that is to think of low to high. How low does it go? How high does it go? Okay, by the way, you want to do it in that order. Left to right. The reason why left to right is because those are smaller numbers to bigger numbers, okay? So we're going from small numbers to big numbers. So left to right for your domain, and for your range, you're going low to high, okay? So small to big, low to high, okay? Now, we're going to talk about interval notation, and again, I'm going to stop this really quick so that you guys can write it down, and then I'll get back to it. Okay, so all of our answers that we're going to do are going to be in interval notation. This is the part that you guys need to make sure you know, okay? So what does the rest of it mean on the right side? Well, basically, the right side is a representation of what those parentheses AB looks like in domain form and in range form. Notice in domain form we have x's in the middle. In range form, we have y's in the middle. The reason is because domain is the x values and range is the y values, right? So that's what it looks like, okay? But like I said, we're not going to use those. The two on the right side, we're not going to bother with those, okay? We're looking at the stuff in the box, okay? So what does that mean? Like parenthesis A, comma B, close parenthesis, okay? And then you'll see a bracket A, comma B with the parenthesis. What exactly does that mean? Well, the number is not included. So if you write the number is not included, you're going to use parentheses. That means that anywhere you see a parenthesis, look at the very top one, parenthesis A, comma B, end parenthesis. A and B are not included in that. Okay, but when you see a bracket, that means it is included. So the number is included. This one is not. This one is included. You're going to use brackets. Okay? That's all it means. So the very top one, A and B are not included. The second one, A is included, but B isn't. The third one, A is not included, but B is. And the last one, A and B are both included. Okay? If you're thinking, what the heck is A and B? These are going to be our intervals, okay, our numbers. So here's the last piece of new learning that we're going to do, and then we're going to go into our examples. Like I said, do not draw the pictures in the examples. You can draw this one if you'd like. but you don't have to draw the pictures in the next, we have 6 of them. And then they're going to go pretty quick, so don't think like, oh my gosh, 6 more examples will take forever. They won't. The setup takes a long time, but the examples are fast. Okay, very, very fast. So, every once in a while, we're going to get a picture that is not going to just end in our graph. It's going to have little arrowheads, right? The little arrowheads means that the line keeps going forever and ever and ever. You guys were taught this in geometry probably before that too. So sometimes we have to use infinity. We're going to say the domain goes from like 2 to infinity. What does that mean? Well, it just keeps going forever to the right side because the domain goes left and right. So it's going to keep going forever to the right side. So when do we use it? When the graph continues forever. So notice this graph that I drew right here. On the left side, there's a termination point. There's a solid dot right there, right? It finishes there. But as I start going to the right, you notice how it keeps going. There's a little arrowhead. That means it's going to keep going down. It's going to keep going to the right. It's going to keep going 2 different directions forever, down and to the right. So down here and to the right. That's what creates a diagonal line. Okay? So I can use infinity when I do these. All right, and right now we're going to do a real quick practice domain and range with infinity in it. But again, when do I use infinity? When the graph continues forever. Okay, so I want to look at my domain and range. All right, so here we go. This is what your homework is going to look like for the other half when you're not doing the vertical line test. The rest is going to look like this. You're going to say, what is the domain? So here I'm going to ask you the question of how far left does this graph go in terms of x? -2. Good. How far to the, well, let me write it down. How far to the right? It goes to infinity, positive infinity. Now you might say, well, that looks like it's going down. Well, yeah, it's going down and right. It's going 2 different directions. So when we're talking domain, you got to think right-wise. It's going to keep going this way. I know it's going down and to the right, but it's going to keep going to the right forever. Okay? Now, we did the interval, the AB. There it is. That's my AB. Is the number -2 for x included? In other words, do you see a nice little solid dot, or is it just at least a nice line? Yeah, there's a solid dot right there. So I'm going to include -2. So I'm going to put a bracket. Never, ever, ever include infinity. Infinity, negative infinity, always parentheses. Okay? So I'm going to put that right here. Infinity, or I'm going to put infinities, positive or negative, are always parentheses. Okay? Infinities are always parentheses. Now, the range, how low to how high. So how low does it go? It's going infinity, but positive or negative? Negative, right? Negative infinity. I'm going to put a parenthesis there because remember, infinities always have parentheses. How high does it go? What's the highest y value? It's 2. So I see why you say 1 because you're like, well, the point's right there, but isn't it higher up to here? That's 2. So I understand why you say 1 because you're like, that's where the point is. True. But it is higher than that though before it, right? So it's going to go to a +2, and it does include it. There's no like gap, no hole there. So I'm going to put a bracket there. All right. Remember, up is positive infinity. Okay. Right is positive infinity. So I'm going to put that right here. If you're going up or right, you can say negative infinity if you're going down or left. Okay. So the rest, so we're done with all the setup. Now we're going to do the examples, but like I said, they're going to go pretty fast because I don't want you to draw them. I don't want you to draw them because we're going to be here for the rest of the period drawing pictures. I just want you to focus on finding domain and range. Okay? By the way, is this one a function if I try the vertical line test? Yeah, it's going to pass. So here we go. Is number 4 a function? No. What about number 5? No. None of those pass the vertical line test. Okay? And again, I don't want you to draw them because they're way too exact. And I want them to be that exact, that perfect. So it's going to take you forever to make sure everything is perfect. we don't have the time for that. Okay? So what is the domain and range of these graphs? So just put number 4, and I want you to write this. D and R. Okay? That's all you're going to do. And then if you really want to draw, leave some space. When you go home, you can draw them out really nice if you want, but you don't have to. All right, domain. How far left does it go? -2. How far to the right? A 3. So I'm going from -2 to 3. Is -2 included? So in other words, where the -2 is, look at the graph. It's going up and down. Are there any gaps or holes or anything like that? No. So that means it's included. What about the side where the 3 is? It looks complete, right? Nice solid line, so it's included. All right, range. How low did it go? Negative what? -4. How high did it go? 3. So it's going to be from -4 to 3. Is it a nice solid line on the bottom? Yeah, so let's include it. What about on top? Yeah, so we're going to include that. So there's your domain and your range for that. Okay, let's do the next one. Number 5, domain, range. How far left does it go? So -2. And how far right? 4. So it's from -2 to 4. Do I include -2 and 4? Do you see any holes at -2 or at +4? In other words, this is what I mean by holes. Do you see that? No, right? There's no gaps. We will see some coming up, but there's no gaps. So I'm going to include it. What about range? What's the lowest it goes in terms of y? 0. What's the highest? 3. Thank you. And you would include both of these because there are no gaps there. You'll be able to tell the gaps. So they're going to do a nice empty circle for you. Okay? So far, hopefully, you're like, okay, not too bad. Number 6, is that a function? Yeah. What about 7? Yeah, you can draw a vertical line. It's only going to touch one. So both of these are functions. Again, don't draw these. I don't want you guys to draw them. We're just doing D and R. Okay? Domain. How far to the left? I know there's an empty circle there, but you can tell me the number. How far to the left does it go? Negative what? -3. Okay. How far to the right does it go? Positive infinity. I heard you say 5, but remember, I just stopped there because I can't use an infinitely large paper. So the arrowheads tell you it keeps going, right? So it's going to positive infinity, and I'm going to automatically put a parenthesis there because they always have parentheses. What about the -3? Is that included, or is there an empty circle? We got an empty circle, so I'm going to put parenthesis, not included. There's my domain. Range, how low does it go? -2. Should I include it? No, right? There's an empty circle right here, right? So I don't want to include that. And how high? Thank you. Positive infinity, right? So there you go. There's my domain and range. Okay? All right, 7's kind of interesting. How far left? It's infinity, but it's negative infinity because I'm going left, right? So it's negative infinity. How far to the right? Positive infinity, yeah. What about how low does it go? Negative infinity. And how high? Positive infinity, okay? So there you go. There's your domain and range. Because this line is going down forever, up forever, to the left forever, and to the right forever. Right? It's never stopping. Just so you know, on quizzes, there is no infinity symbol. So you're going to have to write the word infinity. So make sure you spell it right. Okay, I will write it for you guys in the questions. It'll be there. If you want to write negative infinity, you'll type in the minus symbol and infinity. Positive infinity, you'll put plus infinity. And it says do not use any spaces. So if you want to put like, let's say, the domain for number 6, you're going to put parenthesis, -3, comma, plus, and then type the word infinity, and then parentheses. Okay? No spaces or else it's going to count it wrong. All right? I'm going to double check all the work anyway, but just to kind of save me a little bit of time, no spaces. It'll tell you right there, don't include spaces. All right? It's going to remind you. Here are the last two. So we're just going to do domain and range. And as you can see, like I said, these don't take long unless you're going to want to draw them. Then yeah, they can take a while. The range on this one is tricky. All right? What's the domain? How far left? For number 8. Negative infinity. It's going left forever, right? How far right? I'm hearing some people saying it, but very lightly. 2. Do I include it? Is there a hole there? There's a hole, so I gotta not include it. Okay? The range is tricky. Let's see if anybody can get this right for me here. How low? What would you say? You're going low. How low? Negative infinity. To how high? Now, you might want to say positive infinity, but I'm going to say you're wrong. We are going to get to positive infinity, but there's a cut at 2. I get up to a point at 2 where, think of it like a hole. If I was running, right? If I was running across this graph, when I get to 2, I'm going to have to jump over to the other side, right? I can't just walk or else I'm going to fall into the hole. Right? Just think Mario Brothers, right? So I would go up to 2 and then say or, because there's more, 2 to positive infinity. So this one becomes a gap. Because as you're going from the bottom to the top, you're going to have to jump over something. Okay? So that's number 8. That one's a little tricky, but I mean, not terrible, but yeah, you just got to think of it. If I'm starting from the bottom and I'm going up, I am going to have to jump over a hole to keep going. So that jumping over, that's where the or comes in. Okay? All right, number 9, domain. How far to the left? So from the left, so left, right? 1. Do I include the 1? No. How far to the right? To 3, right? Hold on, my pen just decided to fall asleep. So I'm going to pause it. I'm going to record it later. All right, so far left is going to be 1, not included. Far right is going to be 3, included. And for our range, we're going to go as low as possible, which is -3. But we don't include that. And to +3, we do include that. So again, homework will be on quizzes.